2023. Hope you're having a great event. Onwards to the next session, from one Stephane to another, we've got Stephane Barnatt, who is the head of events at Zoom Events.
Yeah, so I look after the EMEA team for Zoom Events. Obviously, our leadership's out in San Diego, but I'm over here.
Perfect. Just before we get started, if you'd like to ask any questions, we're using Pigeonhole as our Q&A functionality. So you can scan the barcode or go to pigeonhole.at and put in ETL 2023. Alternatively, you'd like to listen to the session in a different language. It's not via the red button, which is what I've been telling people earlier. It's actually, we've got different headsets if you'd like to enjoy this in a language. I think we've got Italian and French and Spanish and German. Oh, pretty much. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Stephane and I'll be back up later to ask any questions.
Thank you. Hi, I'm going to start off with a short introduction of myself, and then I'll start talking about Zoom, and I'm going to jump into the presentation. So I've been in the events industry for around 15 years, primarily in the virtual event space. So I actually got involved historically working to deliver investor relations presentations, moved on to running my own studio, and then have run across and run a couple of webcasting platforms before transitioning to Zoom in 2021, when Zoom had made the decision, after the significant growth in its webinar technology, to move into the events market. So just with a quick raise of hands of people here, how many people actually know that Zoom have an events platform? So about 50-50 of the people here. The reason I bring that up is that Zoom is great at a number of things. Launching products. What we're not great at is making sure everyone's aware of the products. We launch so many products on a consistent basis, and we're constantly evolving and iterating them. So even those of you that have seen the Zoom Events platform before may not be familiar with how it looks today and the steps that we've taken. And the way that we decided to enter the market was really focused on two concepts, and these two words are going to come up a lot in my presentation. So I thought I'd start off by giving a little definition of them both. So consolidation. As we run through what I see as the emerging trends, what we're going to see continue moving forward, I think consolidation is something we're seeing happen in this space. Throughout the pandemic, a lot of disruption came to how we deliver events and what we think an event would be. And from that, there's been a consolidation of the tech stacks that have been used to deliver them. This is always something that's been happening. It's just that the pandemic really forced the investment and the focus on it to actually have that come forward a little bit further. And the second one may sound very similar, but it's actually convergence. So it's a convergence of use cases. It's a convergence of the way that we're thinking about events. It's a convergence of audience. It's a convergence of different technologies to actually think about how we deliver events. Maybe historically they were live. Now we're looking at more of an on-demand and becoming more of a publisher focus. And so really, the focus of my presentation today is I'm not going to run through a demonstration of Zoom Events. That's not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to do is talk to you the story about how we look at the market and how we've come to decisions of what we're doing today and how we think we're going to move into the future. I'd really like it to be a discussion where it's possible so we can think about how the market's going to evolve, because ultimately the people in this room, those that run events, the technologists that bring it in, the people that consultants are the ones that are going to shape it to get the most return on investment for ourselves. Whereas tomorrow, if you want, at the Kaltura Theatre midday, my colleague Dharmesh will be giving an overview and a tech demonstration of the Zoom Events platform for those of you who want to know more about what we're doing in this space. Not to say I won't be weaving a couple of sales messages in and here and there. Hopefully you forgive me for that. So I thought it was very interesting just to start with this concept about what is the event market. And just by happen chance, I checked up, and actually the first ever virtual event took place 30 years ago today. Not today, but this year. It was a convention view. It was done by Visual Data Corporation. And essentially it was just the recording of booths across the floor you see today and uploading it onto a website complete with HTML. Now what was surprising for me when I read about this was completely separate to really the commercial launch of webcasting and webinars back in 1996, which is what we really equate the delivery of virtual content to historically. And what's happened since then? Well, in 2019, the events market was valued at 1.1 trillion, and the virtual events market was only at 78 billion. Now, to note, between 2016 and 2019, the virtual events market has actually quadrupled in size. And then if we fast forward to today, the virtual events market is worth 387 billion. I think it's easy for us all to understand why that market took such a big jump in the past few days. We don't need to keep on talking about what happened, but I think it's worthwhile noting that. But then as we look to the future of 2032, the event market capitalization has jumped to 2.1 trillion, but the expected percentage of virtual event is going to be estimated to be 1.1 trillion. I've got a reference for those that want to see it later on, so anyone's got a question, I'm happy to share those links where I've got those from. And I think what's telling from that is virtual events has gone from 2019 to being less than 10% to ultimately becoming 50% of the market space. And that might seem surprising to you because I feel like post-pandemic, we're all sick of virtual. We're all ready to get out there and meet people again. I mean, hopefully you're all having a great experience shaking hands, meeting people, ex-colleagues, new friends, everything else like that. And there's more events being announced day by day. So why is it that, if that's the case, that virtual events have become such a bigger component? And I think the reason for that is that the term event is actually really broad. So when they said, oh, come talk at Event Tech, I was like, well, what events do you want me to talk about? There's so many different types of events. These are just the use cases that we get involved in at Zoom every now and then. We actually get involved in far more than this. Our platform is being leveraged. And one of the things I love about working in this industry is that I could give you the platform and every single one of you can use it differently for a different purpose in a different way. And it's really an independent business that we also work with. But ultimately, you can break these events down into 3 categories: content, networking, and experiences. Now, every event will generally have a combination of these, but what I'm saying to you is that as an attendee, as a host, or as someone that's coming to exhibit an event, your focus is on one of these 3 concepts. And the major factors that are in play today and are at the immediate focus of what's going to adjust what we're doing in this space is the reduction in virtual event costs. So pre-pandemic, the cost to run an event was staggering. Things like virtual mixing, just the idea of actually getting someone in different countries, mixing these video feeds, the cost to do that was incredibly high. And it's come down by more than 10x over that pandemic time. Secondly, and this may be just the moment we're in right now, but there are reduced budgets for a number of different reasons. I mean, there's inflation, we're all aware of that. But there's also reduced access to credit, which makes it a lot harder for us to go to decision makers within our business and convince them that events are the way for us to go forward, whether that be to an attend event or something else. So then there's also hybrid working. Harder to get to events. It's changing the way that we interact with our audiences. There's an increased focus on sustainability. Events can have quite a high carbon footprint, so that's something we all have to think about. That's why we've got event sustainability taking part next to us today. And then I think the final one, which I know was the presentation before I came on, which is AI and additional emerging technologies. I'm sure they are here, but I've not seen any VR headsets just yet, but I think that's one of the things we'll think to talk to in the future. So what I want to start with is focus on content. And I think the reason I want to start here is that the thing that really drove the growth of virtual technology throughout the pandemic within this aspect was actually the fact that content just became substantially cheaper and more scalable to create, to the point where actually it can become a bit overwhelming. So throughout the event, how many people suddenly got invited to so many webinars they didn't know what to do with, a number of different virtual events. And at the beginning, we were all excited because we were looking for something to distract us from what was going on. But after time, it became a little bit more difficult. And to coin a phrase that I heard a lot, I want to feel like I'm on more than just a Zoom call. That was what we heard continuously throughout that period. And so throughout the pandemic, the focus from providers in this space was to how do we create more engaging content? How do we reduce the cost further? How do we provide more ways for us to connect with the audience and leveraging that content in order to do so? And the reason that's important is that, again, I'm going to say this bravely as someone speaking in front of a bunch of people, it's a lot easier to hit the X button on a video call and tune out than it is for any of you to get up and walk out of the room right now. It's just something that historically we've not done. So how did Zoom combat that? Well, we obviously launched a couple of enhancements to our webinar technology, and we launched events, and we focused on a couple of things. So one was more flexible preventing for scalable content production. So that concept of having to pay thousands and thousands of pounds to connect multiple offices together in order to deliver video effectively without it looking like a Zoom video call was something we did. We started to embed backstage platforms. So you can see there's a big tech team here that's been with me, making sure my sound, making sure the slides are working great. But the ability to do that within the Zoom call, not to use different pieces of technology to enable that, and to have that continuously running in the background of your presentation. So if I'm overrunning, people can give me time clocks. So there's someone at the back of the room right now. If I overrun, they're going to put their hand up and say, you need to quick up. There's people here that will jump in with questions. But historically, that means something that you couldn't do. So we embedded the virtual room into the technology. We didn't say, you can use this technology in the background. We didn't say, have a WhatsApp group going on in the background or anything like that. It's actually embedded in there. We brought more virtual mixing into the solution. And I think this additional change that come, which is something I think we'll talk a little bit more about, is we started to focus a lot more on the on-demand playback. We started to think about how can we edit this to make it more effective content for our attendees to use post-event. Because as we saw that drop off, The long tail of the snake, I always used to say this pre-pandemic, it's become even more important now. The success of your virtual event isn't those that attend it live, it's those that consume the content over a period of what makes sense. And finally, how do we utilize that content in additional ways? So we've got smart clips here, and we can talk about how AI is going to come and change that as well in the future. But ultimately, everything that happened, this ability to deliver extensive amount of additional content has had a price. And I like to look at different industries to sort of talk about what that price would be. So I don't know how many of you have a number of these subscription platforms out, but going into the pandemic, there was really, Netflix, there was Prime, some people had Apple, but coming out, there's all these different providers, and all these different providers have also increased their content production. Up until the strike that's happened recently, you just felt like there was a wave of content coming at you. And this isn't even talking about the fact that we're all listening to way more podcasts. I read a stat that as much as virtual events increased, you can times that by 20 for the number of podcasts launched throughout the pandemic. You can times it by 40 for the number of YouTube channels that launched. So we really are in the content creation age, and the content is washing over us more so than ever. But what did this do? Well, actually, what it meant was that it completely created a behavioral change about how we consume content. So one of the fastest growing industries, or one of the biggest industries for the US, is the movie industry. And in 2019, pre-pandemic, they had 9 1 billion movies. That was the most ever recorded. And now, in 2023, there's only 2 1 billion movies. Some people will argue that's down to quality, but I would argue it's down to actually we've changed the behavioral patterns of how people are used to watching content. We're now so much more used to sitting at home, watching a film with our family, rather than having to spend a lot of money, travel, food, snacks, not being able to pause it when you want to go to the toilet or anything like that to go watch a film. So it's the accessibility of bringing it online that's also made that put a big dent in it. And what people are now trying to create is events to drive people back to the cinema as a way of getting people into that space. And I think that's something that we're going to continue to see in the virtual event world and in the event space like today. I mean, there's 2 events taking place consistently today. There's multiple different keynote presentations you can come and talk to. I believe this is being recorded. That's why there's a camera there. I'm not 100% sure. And many people that watch my presentation today will not be here in the room. And I want to make sure that they're just as valued as the people that are here today. And I think that is something that we're going to look towards. How do we evolve that more? How do we make the video on demand playback more seamless? And then if you think about it from a conference host perspective, actually, how does that fit into your tech stack moving forward? Because this has all been disseminated, separated, and segregated previously, and we're looking at how do we bring that together. And that's where Zoom, again, is putting our focus in. It's not just about, okay, we've got a webinar, virtual event, put it into something else, track the audience. No, let's bring a consistent experience for everyone. And I like to think of that is what has happened in this industry as well, where people are now used to using Prime, Apple, wherever to download and watch their films when they're ready, or their subscription service of choice. And that's where we're going at. So the second part I want to talk about is their networking experiences. And I think it's fair to say that this is the one where virtual has got maybe the biggest trouble right now. And part of the reason is that we just don't value virtual connections as much as we do physical ones. Yeah, we can provide connecting online, and Zoom Events does this. You can create networking profiles. You can share those profiles. You can create your virtual trade show floor, move around, find ways to naturally bump into each other. We can do matchmaking. We can do one-to-one group and group chat. We can do video calling, profile sharing, all these things link into social media. But ultimately, the majority of us still value meeting someone face-to-face, shaking hands, and we're just more used to networking in this way. There are some people that are great networkers online, but it's still not, I would say, the normal activity. But that is changing, because as we look to Gen Z, 56% of them are now making their friends online. What was an even scarier statistic to me, as someone that's not from that generation, is 23% of them trust their online connections more than they do the people they meet in person. So there is a complete, again, as we said, the way we consume content is changing. The way that we are connecting is changing as well. And I think conferences have come out of the pandemic, and we're offering hybrid experiences, we're offering virtual experiences, because we feel we have to, because there's an audience we're underserving. But I think we're going to have to in the future, because there are people that are going to just simply prefer to connect that way. And we have seen that, by the way, during the pandemic, where if you offer the opportunity for people to ask a question during a town hall presentation, I've been in the meeting, everyone's been in it, where the same people dominate the conversation over and over again. You put it virtually, you offer an anonymous way to ask questions, you suddenly get different voices. You get diverse voices that are willing to speak up. And so enabling these diverse and different people to be able to connect and get more value out of your event is going to be just as important moving forward as well. So how can we think about additional ways to increase our audience? Because the vital thing about networking is that it's only worthwhile if you're meeting with people that you want to meet with. The whole point of this event is they want to bring the right audience to it with aligned interests, people that want to meet each other. And I think it's important to remember, just like with social media, by the way, we are the product. Everyone here today is the product of Event Tech Live. There are people coming in today that want to meet you, and you're coming here to meet other people. And there are challenges in bringing audiences together. So hybrid working, again, it seems like it's going to be, I probably should have put that at the beginning as the word that I should talk a lot more about. But the fact that people aren't going to the office every day means like most people aren't living in London nowadays. Most people have moved out. They've wanted more room. They wanted more space. Are they going to come in for your event to meet people? There's budget. We talk about the fact that there's just difficulties in accessing budget to come to events. Zoom ourselves have actually pulled back from the number of events we go to because we want to focus on the ones that best align to the audiences that we want to meet, best align with the network opportunities that we want to have as an organization. There's world events. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but obviously that can disrupt the ability to get people into your event. There's sustainability. There's an increased focus on sustainability. So it may be you want to attend an event. It may be you have the budget to attend an event. But your company's put guidelines in place to say, look, we know you do, but we have a strict travel policy and pass on our sustainability goals where we can't allow you to attend that. And then finally, there's competitive events. And all this is to say that virtual provides a better opportunity to actually improve network capture. And I think a lot of conferences today don't do it very well. For example, my partner works in events, and we talk a lot about this, and it's always like, why is it that when I register for an event, my attendee deals aren't up there straight away, so I can see who's attending the event way before? And I know that there's this scaredness that there doesn't seem as many people coming, not many people will come, but there's also the phrase that if you build it, people will come, and you've got to put the work in to get people there. But provide people the opportunity to network before the event, and suddenly it doesn't become an event that's 2 days. It becomes an event that can be a 3-month life cycle. And you need to do the most to get out of it, not just what's on those live event days. And I think this is where, if we look to where the growth in the market's going to come from in tech, I think it's going to be, one, providing better networking experiences with technology. And I think there's certainly going to be opportunities there as we get to what's coming from an emerging technology perspective. But secondly, it's going to be us having to reimagine what an event is. And I find talking to a lot of event managers is a difficult conversation, even internally. The event is not the day. The event is the whole life cycle. The networking is the whole life cycle. The content may be beneficial for 5-6 years, even after you post it, to bring people into your conversation. And it's really important that we start to think in these ways as well. And I think also, finally, the second point is that on events like this, we run this event, we run it daily, but Event Tech Live needs to curate this audience. We need to make sure this audience are informed. Everyone comes here with a certain level of understanding. And the way we do that is we generate continuous content throughout the year to build that audience, to make that audience excited to come to the event, and to make sure that we've got an event there with aligned interests. So then we come to the final category before I jump into more, and this is experiences. And you know, Zoom has got involved in doing this. We did virtual experience throughout the pandemic. As an F1 sponsor, we provided the ability to do the Paddock Club virtually. This is something we provide. We're still strategic partners with F1 to do this. I'm just going to say that, for me personally, I'd much rather be at the racetrack than virtual. That's not dismissing it, because again, there are people, people that are going to want this experience. And the fact that we can now offer this tiered experience is a new way of monetization for a lot of these companies, because there are people that are never going to be able to afford, or simply are not going to be able to come to these events. So offering that additional option is something that people will value. It's just that internally, when I said it immediately, people are like, of course I want to be at the track, but there are people that can't, and so providing that option is super valuable for them. But I think ultimately, this is an area where virtual needs to again get better, and I'll talk a little bit more about how I think we can do that. But this is the fastest growing part of the events industry: concerts, festivals, it's just generally the fastest growing. But what's interesting about that, because I started off with content. The reason I started off with content is, even if you look at the experiences industry, they too are leveraging content to drive people, to create hype, to get people to their events. I don't follow F1. I love Drive to Survive. It brought me in. And this has had a really transformational effect on the brand. The brand has gone from one that was dying to now one of the fastest growing sporting organizations out there, with 29% increase in race attendance. That's not even including the additional monetization that they're doing on top of that. So this has been a net win, positive for them. And again, I just watched the final episode of Welcome to Wrexham on Disney this morning. You know, more and more people are doing that. Even we talked about the cinema industry recently. One of the biggest boons to cinema this year was Taylor Swift releasing one of her concerts out in film. That was clever because, one, it's creating hype for her next tour, but also she's found another way to monetize her current tour, which made $500 million already. So, you know, and actually, that may not be the final one. I think Beyonce's got one coming out as well, soon as well. So this is going to be a trend of people actually starting to leverage the content to drive that experience. And this is that holistic viewpoint that we need to be thinking about. Again, the convergence of different event types. And I would say the cycle of event content that's going to drive better experiences. But what does this mean in the corporate world? Because it's very easy to talk about all these fancy sporting events in that way. Well, actually, a lot of us leverage these to create networking opportunities. You know, Zoom, we sponsor the F1, we take people to F1 races. That's part of what we do as an organization. We also rely heavily on media influencers and personalities to come and present at our big conferences, to drag people in, to get excited audiences to our events. This is very costly, though. And by the way, the cost of this is going to continue to go up because, as I said, there's competitive events. So if I'm Timbaland or Nelly here, and I want to invite you to an event, and I've got somebody else, I can drive my price up and up and up, and people's rates are going up. We've seen this with tools like Cameo, where all the celebrities come in to start give people happy birthday wishes. Their prices go up because the value of it, the time competition, everything else like that goes up. And we'll continue to see that. So I think there's three main ways that we're doing this right now, driving experiences in the virtual world. And the most basic one is social media. So I talked a little bit earlier on about how the fact that a lot of people like to connect virtually. And I think the thing that I find interesting about networking opportunities is one of the biggest social media network sites is LinkedIn, and we all network on that. But when it comes to attending a virtual event, it's almost like we don't understand how to take those skills across from that one as well. But the idea of how we use social media, like today, there'll be hashtags everywhere, there'll be people asking you to share your content, people asking you to share status updates. It's to make the moment feel bigger than what's going on in the room. And that's what we do with virtual events as well. And actually, some social media platforms are getting into the event business. LinkedIn provide a streaming solution now, so you can start to stream there to reach their audience through that place. X, formerly Twitter, launched a couple of different solutions there. And in fact, they had 2 presidential campaigns launched on their platform that got more attendance and more viewers than they ever would have got on cable media, and they smashed their fundraising goals. Now, they were to varying levels of success, and neither of them are going to win their presidential campaign run, but it's just an interesting use about where things are going down the future. And then the second one, I think, is technology to create immersive experience. So we can see here the different video walls and stuff to create a better experience for people attending it. I don't know if anyone's been to any London art galleries recently, but I feel like immersive art is the new trend. And it's almost like we don't pay artists to come up with new things. We take old art and we create to turn it to be immersive instead. And that's the experience moving forward there. But obviously, I think there's the way that you can do this with AR, augmented reality. I don't think we've seen that really take off in the way we all expected it to. And then there's the ongoing trend of the metaverse and VR. And I'll touch on them in a little bit, but I think that their impact on the industry may not come in the next 10 years. It's going to be interesting to see how Apple's device launches, because I think that's going to be a telltale moment for us. It's like the tablet device was something that people didn't think would ever work. Apple brought it out, it worked. VR headsets came out in 2010, but their use set is actually really niche. They're nowhere near as the mainstay as what you would think. The cost of running one is actually ridiculously expensive. It's not just the idea of, I've got to get a platform. You've got to build the environment. You've got to build that environment in a virtual tool, and that's a different skill set. So that's a high cost, high demand. And then you need to have the attendees have the computer power to actually come and watch that. So if you think about you want to reach in a global audience, that's not something that's very easy to do right now. But I think it's something to watch, because if Apple do nail that, as they've done with the tablet device, the cost will quickly come down. Challenges will then enter the market and become more popularized. And then the final one, I think, is gamification. I think we're all familiar with gamification. I think this is something that actually combining this with augmented reality could be a way to the future. But the simplicity of it is, how do you create an experience that people actually like with gamification? I think it's become too simplistic. It's become like an add-on. Say, oh, we're going to gamify our event, but no one really knows what it means. And I think the reason that we struggle with driving experiences the most is that it's actually a very niche skill set. There's not many people out in the world that are particularly good at driving physical event experiences, let alone virtual event experiences. So this, again, the cost of that is quite dramatic and quite high. But more so than that is that we're all humans and we like novelty. And so creating a really good experience means okay, I went to this event, it was a great experience. You can't just replicate that event. We continually look for things that are new, latest, innovating and changing. And I think that's going to be one of the ones that we think about as we move forward. So I'm going to come back now to those two words, consolidation and convergence. And the reason I bring this up, and I feel somewhat intimidated to say this in an audience full of, in a conference full of event tech suppliers, is that a lot of the requirements for event tech is coming to all-in-one solutions. You know, that's what Zoom has moved into the space. We saw a fragmented space. We had a number of organizations utilizing our webinar platforms. So in 2021, we had about 40% of daily global webinars being utilized on Zoom. The majority of those webinars were being put into alternative platforms for people to consume that content. And alongside that, they may have a different ticketing app, they may have a different registration app, they may have a different engagement app, they may have a different virtual platform, they may have different production tools, may have different content management system. And quite frankly, for me as an event organizer, that's quite stressful. Running events are stressful as they are already. I've got my C-level executive that's going to come on stage and speak, and he just wants to know that he can be heard and seen by everyone. But me, I've got to worry, well, the attendees have got to get in, they've got to find a way to ask a question, I've got to make sure that the transcription service is working, I've got to make all these things are working just to get the time off to make it work. And then as an attendee, it's frustrating. You log in, I've got to log into another platform, then another platform, then another platform, then another platform. And so Zoom looked at this and we decided to create an all-in-one solution that really takes this on. I'm not going to say here that we can cater for every single event, because events, as I said, are very wide and there are a number of niche requirements, and your event is always going to be personal to you, and you will have an event tech stack that you've curated over time to make sure it delivers on what you need it to do. What I am saying, though, is that you need to be open to the opportunity to look at alternatives for it and consolidating where you can, because what that is going to do is open up budget to give you better opportunities to do face-to-face networking. Open up more budget for you to do better experiences whilst driving down the cost and the effectiveness of your content creation for the top of funnel with your marketing teams. To create that thought leadership content that stays around for ages, that makes sure that people are going to continue to come back to your name. And also to drive your internal business forward. Town halls can be some of the driest content out there. People of certain seniorities can think they're very important and everyone should listen to what they've got to say. I tend to not watch my own town halls. I watch them on demand, not because I don't like them, but because between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock on a Monday, when our town hall is, I'm better served talking to my customers, and I can listen to that later on when I'm in the gym or I'm walking home from work, and I can take the notes from that. And then the second point I want to talk about is convergence. So as I talk to you about this market, I said that there's a consolidation of event tech, but there's also a convergence of how these technologies are utilized. It started off at the beginning of the pandemic. I came from a traditional broadcasting background, where you'd utilize a webcasting tool, an IPTV solution. And the thing that wasn't cutting the mustard throughout the pandemic was the fact that there was such a long delay. It felt that whilst we were getting our message out there, we weren't connected because I was always 90 seconds ahead of the person that was listening to me. The issue was that webinar platforms had lower latency, but they couldn't scale for the audience size we wanted to do, and they couldn't deliver on the quality. Throughout the pandemic, that differential disappeared. And there will still be a place for broadcast solutions, it's just a very different requirement than the webinar tool is. And then we had virtual events. I talked about the fact that Zoom was sitting inside virtual event platforms, many of them here today, and Zoom still sits inside of them. But the idea of actually saying, no, we don't want to have a different platform, we want to have a consistent experience and take over that. So Zoom moved into that space to do that. And then I think the final one, and this is I think more to where we're going in the future, is that video on demand. Zoom is a video-first company. I know everyone thinks of, you're the meetings company, you do our pub quizzes that we did on Sunday nights and stuff like that. But actually, what we are is we're a content creation tool. I talked to you about the vast growth of podcasts and YouTube channels. Actually, the vast majority of those are created on Zoom because it's just really easy to create content on it. What we need to do a better job is providing you the content management and on-demand service, and then service that content to give it to your audiences when they need it in the way that they want it. Rather than saying, okay, put it on Zoom, download it, encode it, edit it, move it, all that stuff. That just takes up time. It takes time away from your teams to do what they're better off at doing, which is either creating more content or making connections with the people watching your content. And then I think the final one, in terms of when I said convergence and consolidation, is really what we talk about here today, which is hybrid audiences. Pre-pandemic, you had a virtual audience, you had an in-room audience. We did not value them the same way. Coming out of the pandemic, we saw that we have to value them as one. So whilst hybrid is nothing new, the application of it today is completely different. And that's the point where we come to market with Zoom events, where it's like all-in-one solution, in-person, hybrid, virtual. The platform is the same no matter what. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that is. So where I like to think we are today, as I said, consolidation, convergence, is that the average work desk looked like this in 1992. Now it looks like this. We're not there yet in event technology, but this is where the goal we're moving to. The point is that you can have a single platform. Now you still, if you have a niche requirement, you can't do it. You can still install applications on those devices to fulfill that requirement. But ultimately, we've cut out so much of the fat in the organization. I mean, I'm a very unorganized and messy individual. So if I'd had a desk like that, it would be all over the place and it would just stress me out completely. And I think about the same when I think about how you organize events. It's a skill set to organize all these different technologies and all these different solutions, and it takes away from ultimately what you're trying to do, which is deliver great content, great networking opportunities, and great experiences. So I want to sort of focus on about how I can see this changing and some effects we're already seeing in the market. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with E3 conference. It is the largest video games conference that takes place every year. I think it started in the early 90s. At its height, it had 70,000 attendees, 400 plus exhibitors. Back in 2013, a couple of their major presenters actually decided, look, we could start streaming this online ourselves. We don't need to come to these conferences anymore. And slowly but surely, that started to deteriorate. And the event became smaller and smaller. Now, that doesn't mean that it wasn't making a lot of money. It doesn't mean that there weren't a lot of video game companies going there. It doesn't mean that there weren't companies not exhibiting, but still going there to create experiences and do connections. But what happened, when it went virtually, because the conference wasn't really ready for that, it was losing money. And so in 2023, it comes back. They've actually decided they're not doing it this year. They're going to go away and think about how they come back to market. And I think how they come back to market is going to be very interesting, because it could be an indication of how conferences can go. Because the struggle that E3 had was their audience was no longer sacred. The event experience got democratized throughout the pandemic, where the cost has been reduced so much that anyone can do it. And so the companies that would usually come to events like this are becoming a lot more picky about the events that they come to, because they're busy doing their own events, delivering their own content to create their own network and managing that one to grow that one. And one of the things I think that's been a really powerful thing about this, I don't know if everyone remembers when GDPR came in, we all thought that was going to kill email marketing. GDPR was going to kill email marketing. It's actually made the return on investment on email marketing go through the roof, because you've got a more qualified audience. So creating events and delivering that to build out your GDPR list is actually a better way of driving that type of funnel than ever before, because what people want to do is hear qualified messages to qualified people. So I think this is a case study. I'm interested to see how this reflects later on in the market. But again, to say, there are still plenty of video game conferences taking place. It's just that the biggest one changed, and now the companies that are telling them are much more selective about the ones they go to. As I say, and I think you're going to see that continuously, organizations to think about the ones they tend to. I'm now going to get to one of the elephants in the room that I did mention at the beginning. I've not really talked so much about it, is sustainability. And this is an important thing to think about how we're going to go to. I think the fact that Sustainability Live is taking place at the same time is telling, right? One, it's such a big viewpoint. Two, the organizer decided to be more sustainable and bring an audience together for one event rather than multiple events. So it's a consolidation and convergence of audience. As I said, I would continue to use those words over and over again. But this is an industry expected to grow. So ESG investments are expected to soar by 86% to 33.9 trillion by 2026. And over 2,200 businesses so far have adopted net zero commitments by 2030. So why is that important when we talk about events? Well, again, why virtual? 70 to 95% of the carbon emissions for event are directly related to travel. I know this is nothing new to everyone, but it's always worth reminding people about. But I think what is important to look at is that a single flight from London to New York is equivalent to 46,875 8-hour Zoom call. So that's one participant going to an event, or 46,000 over a Zoom call. That's the impact you can save. And even if you turn off the camera, you're reducing those emissions by 96%. So if you start to think about, well, actually, we're just doing a content delivery dump here for most of the event, actually, the impact is even lower than that. And the reason this is important, and why I think this is going to mean that hybrid plays a bigger journey in this, is that by offering a hybrid option, organizations are very to say, well, this is how we've offset our carbon. People didn't come to our event. This is the reduction we provided. Historically, they would have come to our event. These are some reductions that we're taking in place. And this is a net calculation that people make. So not only is hybrid events going to be suitable for expanding our audience, expanding our reach, making sure that we're able to deliver content in more effective ways, but it's also going to help us tell that ESG story internally. It's going to help us make savings that we didn't count on for before. So as you look at hybrid events, this is Zoomtopia from this year. So this is something we did at hybrid. So we did a thing where you can bring all the video people in on the screen so you can feel like part more of the action that we did. And then, hybrid's been nothing new for Zoom. We were doing this throughout the pandemic. This is mainly content, but these were high-end production events. So here we've got the Singapore National Day Rally, all those video screens as people being set up. This is a high production event. And again, the Indonesian Digital Literacy Initiative with over 600,000 attendees watching. But I think the key thing is that I said hybrid's nothing new. But it's changed. The requirements are different. What people want from hybrid is different. So we looked at ways we could approach the hybrid challenge, and I think the first one was simplifying it. So the idea that, and again, I'm not trying to rag on the conference, but I've had to download 3 apps to come here. It's a bit frustrating. One to scan people, one to do these things. I'm just saying that could be simplified as an approach. The other one is that's just the general audience setup, the scanning and everything like that. So bringing that into a single place, a consolidated solution, is one that we think brings a lot of value. Different ways to engage audiences. So again, we've got Pigeonhole here today. It's a great tool, absolutely love it. Some of our customers use it very regularly. But the idea that you could have a consistent app for polling for everything that then filters with the people that watch online, but is also related to the technology you're delivering the content on without having to set up multiple things, is something that we think is really important to drive better engagement. And then obviously we want to expand the reach and foster community beyond the event. And this is the delivery, and I think going to be really the future of content is not so much in the live event, but thinking about how you can deliver that. So how do we do that from a technology perspective? Well, flexible ticketing and registration, a mobile app. So the mobile app is something we utilize to do the networking, obviously look around the room, know where you're going, understand what the sessions are. And again, that's stuff that goes live well in advance of the event, telling you who's going to be there before you get there. Then there's on-the-site check-in and badge printing. Now, this is a part of it where Zoom are not there right now. We're building our way to there. So we have partnerships with different providers to provide those solutions in place. But we also provide a contactless solution today. So if you just want to have a contact solution utilizing the Zoom app, you can do that. And then the final one is in-event participation. So as I said, I mentioned what we're doing, so Q&A, everything like that, bringing it all together. And this is simplifying the experience, not just from the aspect of, it's going to give everyone a great experience, but you're the event host, single reporting, much better way to understand your audience, much more greater idea of success metrics. So to give an idea of the only time I'm actually going to show you the platform, this is what it looks like for everyone that's interested. Again, we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then before I jump to Q&A, I think I did want to touch on this because I'm by no means an AI expert, but I think it is important that if we look to the future, we think about, as I said, this overall trend of consolidation and convergence, AI and emerging tech. So I talked about the fact that I think we're all looking, I personally am looking to see what's going to happen with Apple Vision Pro. But I think it's also interesting to see the jumps that have been made with the metaverse. So at the top there is, I don't know if anyone saw it, Lex Friedman did an interview with Mark Zuckerberg. They did it completely in the metaverse. So we've got him wearing his Oculus Rift, how it appeared, and then how he appeared in the... So the graphical fidelity of these things is coming to the point where it is going to be almost indistinguishable from being there in real life. The question is around cost and how applicable that's going to be in the corporate world in the short term. I think we're going to continue to see this, just like we did, I don't know, everyone thought holograms would be a thing for a while. I don't know if you saw Tupac Shakur appeared at the Coachella Festival recently. They said, I think that the initial cost that came out, anything between 100 and 400K. They actually think the cost of delivering that was close to a couple of million as a tech demo. It's just that the end customer paid for that in the end. So I think we're a way off of these actually coming through and making a big difference. But we have seen some tech, I think, come back. I think one of the things that I've been really happy to see come back is the QR code. I remember 2013 thinking the QR code was dead. It was never going to go anywhere. But the actual it just took the right application of it. And I think that's what we're going to continue to see. With AI, I think there's a whole host of ways this is going to make events better moving forward. I talked about the networking problem. I think the fact that you could have an AI companion that's going to help you reach out to people in terms of crafting your connective messages, because you don't have the skill set to make that, is going to be vital. The fact that it's going to qualify the audience for you and bring you the right people to you as we get through that is going to be vital. But where I think it's especially exciting is content creation, content manipulation. We're seeing that already. Obviously, there's a conversation about ChatGPT. Again, I'm not sure how much of this is going to influence in the next 10 years, because although we see it going at pace, I've been at a number of events where companies have said, look, we're just not allowed to use AI. We're not allowed to use it. We're not allowed to use it for anything outside of their own investigation internally. So I think we're going to have to see how this works. And there's also a couple of key court cases going on about ChatGPT around the litigation copyright law. So we're going to have to wait to see how that unfolds before we think about how AI starts to influence the creation of content that isn't your own. But where it can be really useful is coming in and actually saying, right, I did this 1 hour piece of content. I've now created a content backlog, because what I'm doing in business is I'm not just focused on live event, I'm creating continuous content at pace and scale, and I'm making it as an archive that I can give to my users, and you can utilize the AI and the big data to find the points of interest to you, much like the YouTube algorithm does for us on a daily basis, but now think about how that can support you in a marketing initiative as well. So hopefully you found that somewhat helpful. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of indication about how we are looking at this market. As I said, my colleague Dharmesh will be doing more of a demonstration about what our platform is tomorrow. But if you want, I am around, so feel free to come and speak to me, unless there's any questions.